Good morning, welcome back. This is Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for staying with us, talking about the stories making the front pages of the publications, including what the former president had said yesterday in relation to the advice he had for his successor, William Ruto, and saying that the government bears the responsibility to address the needs of the people. And in one of the sessions he had with editors at here in the county of Nairobi in regards to state surveillance of his security and what he plans to do next after leaving power, and attending to some of the assignments that were tasked the former president to mediate the crisis in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and also the political crisis in Ethiopia, bringing together the warring parties and midwifing the two peace processes here in the country. And that was in relation to what the former head of state had to say. And coming to you, Honorable Kagushia, as we finish up on this and talk about the opposition suspension of the protest, still we don't have the presence of the Kisii County Senator Richard Onyonka, who had confirmed his presence with us here yesterday. And Honorable Kagushia, the former head of state and the current president had come together in 2012 and coming against the backdrop of the skirmishes that we had in 2007. Yeah. The unity that was touted as an endgame to the politics of ethnicity in the country ended up forming the Jubilee Party in 2016. That is after the TNA and the URP parties had merged. But what happened in the past 5 years appears to be speaking different of what they promised. That is the Uhuruto government and presently the standoff between the former and the current president. I mean, tell me about the sudden walking away from the union that politicians often form, and why do you think they are so short-lived? Do they address the interests of the people or the interests of the politicians or the political class in Kenya?
Thank you. I would say a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. And just picking it from where my brother Ochieng did live, you were trying to, in a way, look at the responsibility sharing on the politicization of this republic beyond what is fathomable and beyond what is expected, what is desirable. And for that reason, then, we keep our country in a political mood that is unnecessary and that only causes us economic pain from time to time. And this has happened because of definitely immediately after doing an election, we do not accept that we have lost an election, and we put the country back into political mood. And you have heard William Samoei Ruto say, and so we have also said, that this is the time we are going to fix the politics of this republic. Yeah. And there's no other way. What is being done now is going to fix the politics of Kenya. We have been rewarding mischief. We've been rewarding this political bickering. When you deny that you have lost an election, you organize violent riots, people die, and to prevent further death or deaths, then you get rewarded by getting a share in government. And this has happened over the years. William Samoei Ruto has said that will not continue anymore, and there will be no reward for that kind of misconduct. And now, that is why you saw the government has largely kept off violence in maandamano. And I'm sure that is the next topic you are going to be handling, and I'll tell you what has been happening. But we have had that problem of political bickering in this republic. And I know for sure it has affected us very, very negatively. And that is one of the things that is going to be fixed as we are moving on, because this time around, there will be no political rewards for those people who engage in violent activities, as that has happened before. And you see, once that is fixed, then everyone will be accepting that the next election cycle begins when the election is near. I mean, the political bickering and all that. And for that reason, Kenyans are also going to be freed from the challenges that they have been facing so far. You have heard of investors also developing cold feet because sometimes we seem to have a higher political risk in this country than some of the other countries. And that has been caused by that denial of loss in elections.
Is it majorly denial of loss in elections, or investors also fear about the cost of production in the country? For example, power and also the taxation regime. Are they not factors? Those are issues that are also important to look at. And the cost of power has not been cheap in Kenya, neither has it been cheap in other neighboring countries. And the cost of doing business in Kenya has largely been improving anyway. Then what informs investors' flight who are taking away their money from the Kenyan market to, for example, in Ethiopia and Rwanda?
Well, sometimes what has been alleged is the issue of political risk. That is one of the things.
And corruption?
Definitely. Corruption has been a big issue. It's a big problem. And really, it's something that we must also fix. And I can tell you from where I sit in the National Assembly, it's one thing that we must address and address very seriously. And this one, we cannot hide our heads in the sand. We must, for example, put cabinet secretaries to task, especially once we have given them money to use. I remember when we were in State House and we were engaging His Excellency the President. You know, we have had several engagements whereby we have had him explain to members, and we have had very candid discussions about how the economy is, you know, is behaving and how what we need, the interventions that we need to do. I remember the last time we were there, I did ask the president about the issue of our cabinet secretaries and the government executive taking care of the resources that we are going to raise through the tax measures that we are having. And I remember the president making a personal commitment and said, Kagusha, I am telling you, I am putting my life and my name on the line for these resources that we are collecting. Yeah? And any person who is going to be caught with their hands in the jar is going to face the law. And you members, in fact, he challenged us, you members, you must also do what you must do.
Okay.
And so we have a task to do. And really we are putting our cabinet on notice.
Yeah.
That they must use the resources they collect well. And we will not be laughing about this because Kenyans have gone through a pinch, you know, through raising some of these taxes and revenues that the government needs to run.
Yeah.
And so we are not going in any way to allow anyone to joke with this and to play around with Kenyan money. We expect when we raise money that is going to be used for construction of houses, that is going to be used for development of our roads, that is going to be used for whatever other issues, that money must be properly used. And anyone who is going to try doing any other thing is going to face the law and is going to face the parliamentarians. Okay.
In May, we had a sit-down with the president, and when the question on KEMSA came up, he took an action the following day immediately. Yeah. What he said was appointed to a cleanup process at the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency. Yeah. You have talked about putting on notice cabinet secretaries and the well utilization of the public funds and coffers.
Yes.
However, to mention this, there's a court order which stopped the Ministry of Trade and the Kenya National Trading Corporation by extension to stop it from selling edible oil that was imported in the country under the Ministry of Trade. And there were a lot of inconsistencies from the onset, that is the procurement process, to award close associates of the trade CS Moses Kuria and by extension the president. Yet there are many companies who had applied for the tender. They were locked out, and in some instances, owners of the same companies were awarded twice or thrice in the documents in our possession. And I mean, this clearly points to favoritism in government. You have talked about the need for inclusion, and what you said was to have all Kenyans on board. Yet your deputy is also on record for describing Kenya as a shareholding company. The Constitution establishes Kenya as a secular state where all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya who have accorded you the mandate. Is this an issue as a member of parliament you would like to follow up, to take accountability and see whether the money of the Kenyan people was properly utilized?
You know, the issue of edible oils really is an issue that has a lot of half-truths. And I suppose even the media in this case are also not very clean on it. Okay. And I mean, no one really seems to want to tell us really where the issue is. But I can tell you from where I stand, and I have done a bit of research on this, there is an issue of the people who have been trading in the edible oils in the past. And by and large, they have also been fleecing Kenyans to a great extent. And there is also now there's an introduction of new measures to import these through the KNTC. And of course, to some extent also removing some of the taxes that were levied, hence bringing down the cost of edible oils in the country. And there are some people who directly lose flat on this. And from my understanding, they have not been very happy about this. And a lot of push and pull that you're also seeing is some of those people who are resisting change. And because clearly there are people who have established their business in this arena for the last many years. And interestingly, the people who have been doing these huge businesses are just the same people. You saw the KEMSA business as well. You know, sometimes I know government also shies off when it's also twisted by the international community. But if you also look at that issue of KEMSA, you'll also see a situation where the people who are also pushing and pulling too hard, sometimes even through those international organizations, are people who have been doing that business, and they fear interruption and disruption. There's a Chinese farm, for example, that has been providing those nets, the KEMSA nets that were being provided. And this time around, they feared they could lose out on this tender, and indeed they had lost. And other new farms had been brought on board. And some of the quotas were very quick to point that they belong to. But the truth of the matter is, the farms were going to provide these at even more affordable prices. But now... But
then again, why would then the... you have said half-truths about this. We'll come to the edible oil. But why would the PS be fired on the issue of KEMSA?
Yeah, you see, let me first of all start with the end. The end is the Chinese farms that have been providing these nets ended up providing the nets. They still were given that tender. And I don't know whether we were better off Chinese processing this, was it a 3 billion tender, or Kenyans processing the same. You get. And if a Kenyan farm did actually provide those nets, so long as they are quality, so long as they are provided with the right pricing and all that, that ought to have been okay. And someone seated somewhere out of this country saw what was happening, and they said, if you don't go this direction, we are going to withdraw we are going to withdraw these funds.
Okay, not the direction, say corruption.
I mean,
it pointed to loss.
I hope you also understand. I hope you also understand that these corrupt practices are not only confined in Kenyan systems. I hope you also understand that the systems, these global systems, also sometimes also do have interests in this, because at the end of the day, Ayub, it is business, and someone will provide the service. But who is that? Who takes home the profit? Are you getting from this? And in this case, the fight that was happening was really between Kenyan farms and some international Chinese farms. Are you getting? And really what was happening is that the Chinese farm was at the verge of losing. Now, I do not want to justify anything, but I also want to say we also need to be very keen and also be very careful so that we do not think that which comes from the international systems is which is good as opposed to what is Kenyan. And also the international systems are also very quick to make our people collide. Are you getting? Especially where they are the ones who gain at the end of the day.
Yes.
So I know a little bit of the politics around that net issue. And why I know it also because, luckily, I also do happen. I have a bit of connection with Geneva. So sometimes I get to understand 1 or 2, 3 things.
Okay, thank you.
You know, in one of my lives, I've also done international relations and diplomacy. I have a lot of interest in that. So I would normally get a bit of information. And I know some of the politics that played around there. Okay. And eventually, Kenyan farms were put aside as international farms won the tender.
Thank you. And the full truth about the edible oil is that you have mentioned the media's misrepresentation of the facts, is that KNTC had the capacity to directly procure the oil from Malaysia. It didn't. So it procured Kenyan farms. The procurement process wasn't fair because some Kenyans were locked out. And when it came, they were sold at 2,600 shillings. They imported at 2,000. So 2,600 plus VAT to retailers who will sell to you, me, and Mr. Ochieng here. We will end up selling at more than even what local manufacturers are selling. What's the point then if cabinet approval majorly was to reduce the cost of living, yet you are selling the very same imported oil at a cost of more than even local manufacturers?
But on the import of this oil, the oil prices actually came down. On the shelf.
4,400 shillings. Okay, Honorable Ochieng, you had a point.
No. I think, you know, the issue here is the KNTC, the edible oil intervention, was meant to reduce the prices. And on the whole, the prices went down. But you must know that this is a market that has a lot of cartels. You'll find that one company that manufactures edible oils has 3, 4 lines. Because of market, you find this Ayub belongs to this company that also produces Ochieng and produces Kagushia. Same products, different prices, and there's a lot of insider trading in there that makes the prices go up. And so government intervention was meant to make the situation better. Okay? And I agree with you on the fact that it would have been done better too. Yeah, it would have been done better at the level of procurement. I think there was so much hurry. If, you know, this I will say without any fear of contradiction, that as a country, we've had so many good plans on how we want to grow. Our problem has always been in implementation. We sit down, prepare a very good plan, and hurry to launch, hurry to, you know, kickstart without looking at some of the risks involved. I believe that what has happened in the KEMSA situation, in the edible oil situation, will give this government open the eyes and say that if you're going to go the same way in future, we must do 1, 2, 3. But on the issue of the nets, and even the edible oils, Ayub, and Honorable Kagucha talks about local farms and Chinese farms. The bottom line on this matter is that all of them are going to be importing nets. None of them being produced locally. I would be happy if even the Kenyan farms that were saying were locked out were saying, we produce these nets here. So why are we allowing a Chinese to import? I mean, if you're importing nets worth 5, 6, 7 billion, and you've been doing this for the last 10 years, what is the best strategy? Say we are going to sponsor a farm to start producing the nets here with the specifications required. I mean, if you want to look for the question you asked earlier about why we are not growing, it's doing the same thing. I mean, if you import edible oils worth 1 billion shillings, whom are you keeping at work? The Chinese manufacturer of the edible oil, not a Kenyan consumer. So I believe that we are going to, as we try to stabilize the economy and lower the cost of living, there are things that we are saying that we must do. And that's why in the Finance Act, we have put taxes on some things, on areas where we are saying that we better buy Kenya to build Kenya. And I would, where I sit, even where it's going to cost us a little bit more, I believe that on things like edible oils, things like those things we're calling nets. If you know, for example, the budget we're passing, how much money goes to purchase of furniture from Singapore and China, if you know how much money goes into importing even this glass we're having here, it's a lot of money, things that we can produce locally. And so I believe that as part of our duty as Kenyans and public servants and leaders is to walk the talk. Ayub, there's no country, in my opinion, that has as good policies as Kenya has. Policies, in terms of exposition of policies and preparing them and implementation becomes a problem.
Okay.
Because there's this politician, the member of parliament, who wants to build a classroom this nicely, but is being told, wait a bit, let's do that. No, I want to launch it tomorrow. You're being told, wait for this. I mean, we cannot do that. We saw this in SGR. SGR was more than half a trillion Kenya shillings worth of project. No single company came up because of SGR in the country. Yet the building of the other meter railway that was done by the colonialist led to almost all the trains you see along the way from Mombasa all the way to Busia, because of our hurry to implement and the quick-back system, okay, and where people don't want to do things because they are good and they're service-oriented. People look at things and we are doing this, how much are we going to make from it? If we don't come back to the culture of saying we are building our country, this is our country, no one else will build it for us, and say that if this phone costs 100 shillings, we'll bet 100 shillings, we must put our kickback of 50 shillings. We'll never move anywhere.
And talking about the resource malfeasance, the Auditor General says, for example, because I've largely talked about governance and what needs to go into it, Kidero and Sonko regimes, for example, in the city of Nairobi, hid 18 billion Kenya shillings on source revenues. That's according to a report by the Auditor General, and City Hall revenue collected versus recorded revenue, according to this report by the Auditor General in the years between 2016 and 2019, and not declaring the staggering 18.46 billion Kenya shillings. That's nearly the one financial year's allocation to the country.
Because in our country, crime pays. In our country,
it's all what we talked about here.
In our country, hard work never pays. We've turned the rules around. In our country, crime pays, and if you are a criminal and you are rich because you stole, you are a hero. People elect you to office.
All right. Let's now shift attention. And Winnie, if we can have this, including the suspension of the protest by the Azimio Coalition political party. In a statement yesterday, the coalition party had said that tomorrow, the day will be to mark in honor of the victims of police brutality in previous protests. It said that it has made the decision that on Wednesday, rather than go to the streets as earlier planned for peaceful demonstrations, we will hold solidarity parades and vigil for victims of police brutality in various locations and in all parts of the country. Further on, the coalition said, we are calling on Kenyans to come out and light candles and lay flowers in remembrance of and respect for the victims during the vigils. It said candle lighting and laying of flowers. We encourage Kenyans to say prayers and read out the names of the victims of police brutality. The coalition team is also asking the religious leaders and the people of Kenya to extend exercise by dedicating Friday, Saturday and Sunday for prayers in remembrance of the victims of police brutality during the past demonstrations, according to the statement sent by the coalition political party suspending tomorrow's demonstrations. Honorable Chiang, coming to you, what do you think might have informed the decision to not hold the demos tomorrow by the coalition party?
I think there's pressure from all corners that the results of demonstrations are deaths and anarchy and violence. And so I don't even want to imagine that it's not informed by anything. It's common sense. I would imagine that, you look at what's happening, and like I told you, my heart goes out to those who have lost lives, lost a limb, got injured in these demonstrations, both the protesters and the police officers who have been involved in this. We really ought not to have gotten where we've gotten with protests. And I wanted to say something on this matter before I just answer the question directly, okay. Ayub, in this country, protests have had very positive results in the past. In this country. Protests has led to so many things happening the right way. And so protests per se are not bad. You saw how protests helped in '92, during the Mwai regime. Protests make leaders wake up to do what they need to do. And that's why we have it in the Constitution, that you have the right to express yourself through protests. Mm-hmm. That one has to be made clear, that no protester is a criminal. I mean, with our history, if you don't allow protests, anybody, any ruler would come in and run that over us. So protests are protected by the law, and I believe that they should remain so protected. The problem we have here today, Ayub, is that we have refused to accept that there can be peaceful protest. as David Ochieng has been involved in protests at the university, in my political life, in my other life before John Kenya Kwanza. I mean, I've had protests, and we've had protests. I remember of Parliament in the streets, and we've gone back home uninjured. And so I believe that we can actually have peaceful, or what the Constitution calls peaceable protests. We can have them. And we've had them before in this country. People are here people talking about Israel or whatever. We have had peaceful protests in this country before. Even in this term of Parliament, I've seen people come to Parliament to protest. They walk along Parliament Street, they're allowed, police escort them, and they go home after that. And so let's, first of all, agree that it's possible to have peaceable protests, unarmed. Number two is that the protests that have led to loss of lives and limb last week were not peaceful protests. And the protesters, or the leaders of the protesters, did not take charge of the protests. Because ideally what should happen is this, Ayub, that if David Ochieng is the leader of a protest, then I should know who is participating in these protests. I should be clear that this is how we're going to do these protests. And I should be clear that I can take responsibility of the people who are going to take part in these protests. Now, if you call protests all over the country, and you are doing so belligerently, and you do it in a manner that was said by Honorable Kagusha, that the concern, and I agree with you, Kenyans are hurting. The cost of living is very high. But that has been now turned into something else. It's not about cost of living. It's about, can we topple this government? This government is illegitimate. Can we do something about it? And so you are turning this into not a peaceful protest, but a political tool towards trying to gain power. And so I must say that I'm happy that Azimio has called the protest, because it was getting a level where, even a cat, harmless cat, if you pushed a cat to a corner where there's no window and there's no room for breathing, it's going to scratch you thoroughly. So if you are telling a president and his government that we are going to make you legitimate, we're going to topple you, measures must be put in place to ensure that that does not happen. And so I want to advise that going forward, if we want to do protests, let's be sure that they're going to be peaceful and that we can control our protesters. Number two, the vigil that has been called for tomorrow. I agree with it, absolutely. And as we do the vigil, let's do the vigil both for those who are protesting and also for the law enforcers, the police. Let's remember them too, that they are all out there trying to make our lives easier, better, peaceable. And finally, on the same matter, Ayub, I've had my heart bleed so badly the last 5 days. We cannot try to profile a community, profile a people on protests, and in the process also profile individuals working in government. I've had my heart bleeding about how my friend and the PS for Interior has been profiled. Oh, he's killing these people. You know, it's wrong for people to start individualizing protests. People are protesting for a just cause. Let's keep those issues where they are, at the level of protesting for a just cause. Where, as a protester, you see that your life is going to be in danger, the best thing always to do is to withdraw. And this last protest, where that route I come from Maseno all the way to Busia, instead of people protesting peaceably, there were young men on the roads stopping people, picking their phones, taking money from cars. This has to be stopped. And so I want to request, because the protests are not ending. We always have protests going on. If there are going to be protests, my request is let's be able to express ourselves peaceably and armed, so that the protests have a meaning.
Thank you. Honorable Kagusha, before we take a look at the concerns raised by the Law Society of Kenya, right groups who have documented cases of police killings, and we'll also talk about the violence meted on police, because it's cutting two-way. Also, there are cases where police have been injured, some who have lost their lives, and though the Ministry of Interior has not given an account or a documented account of how many police officers we have lost during the course of the opposition protests. But what do you think might have been the reason which had led to the suspension of the opposition protests, which were scheduled for tomorrow? Did, in your view, some sense prevail?
Yeah, I want to thank the Azimio or the ODM brigade for cancelling those protests. and also point out that what has caused this is not from their own volition. It is from intelligence that has been provided and that has helped to target and put emphasis on where it is necessary. The protests, and I don't know why we are calling those ones protests, because a protest is very different, is what we have had before and what we are also seeing in other countries. What we have had in this country would be something akin to domestic terrorism. Is someone who brings hooligans on the road. They injure and maim Kenyans. They steal from Kenyans. They destroy public property. And all this is done not for the purposes that are put there, out there, that it is a cost of living. All these ones have been done with the purposes of creating anarchy and helping on issue of power sharing arrangement drive. And as I said again, it has been a very well choreographed narrative that has been given each department or each sector to deal with in their own way. You have some religious bodies. You even have some of the media people. You also have on this other side some of the civil society. And you have, I mean, all of them choreographed and on a daily basis bringing up issues. And you can clearly see it's a script. And you see that is what we also used to have for 5 years, that script.
And to ask you this, as you proceed with your submission, you'll have time.
Yeah.
And in your view, you have said this is a well-choreographed script.
Yeah.
And who is the author of that script?
It's the Handshake Brothers.
Who are they?
I mean, who doesn't know the Handshake Brothers? So the issue is the...
You mean the former Prime Minister and the former President?
All the arrangements have been clear on what they want to achieve. And unfortunately, you have heard in the past someone say, a politician from ODM saying, that for Raila Odinga to ascend to power in this country, a few lives must be lost. A few people must die. And when this guy is saying this, gullible Kenyans are clapping and shouting. And they don't know they are the same people who will suffer that fate. They will be the sacrificial lambs. Let me tell you what has been happening. You saw the kind of destruction that happened at Mlolongo. I've said it before.
I was there.
Those young men that you saw there, and you can see the kind of restraint that was there with the police for a whooping 3 hours. No intervention, no nothing. But those young men who destroyed Expressway were all ferried from a certain quarter. The guys who went and caused mayhem in Kitengela are not Kitengela people. They were strangers to Kitengela people. They all were ferried from somewhere from Mwai Njiro area. They were ferried from there and taken to that place. And we can, go on and on and on and on with the kind of ferrying that was happening. Now, my brother, I want to tell you this. The killings that you have also seen, including Mlolongo, there's a young man who was killed in Mlolongo, a student.
4.
Yes. Those killings that you're seeing, most of them were not even perpetrated by police. Quite a number of those killings were perpetrated by goons. And when ODM says that there were hired goons inside their protests or their riots, their violent riots, it is true they were there.
Well, how did they then undertake the killings?
They shoot. They are armed. And they are within the file and the rank of the rioters. And the only thing they don't say, that they don't give us the truth, is they say that these guys who are within their group which is violently protesting are hired by government. It is not true. The fact of the matter is, and I said it here again when we had another discussion here with the ODM lawmakers, senators, the people who have been hired to execute these are goons who are also hired by the same organizers of those protests and those riots. And that is why we are calling this one domestic terrorism. Okay. Why am I saying that? Okay. You organize a riot, then ensure you plant 1 or 2 people and give them guns. Are you getting? And that is why now I'm saying the stoppage of these violent protests is because of the intelligence which has been served, and they have targeted those guns, people who are providing these guns. And you have seen in the last several days, the police have recovered 23 guns from some of the high-ranking people in Karen.
Okay.
Are you getting? I know the president has come very strongly to say that the 23 guns were not recovered from his son's home. And he says his son had only 6 guns, which apparently he says he uses to shoot birds in Mwai, you know. And I don't know whether the people of Kirinyaga and the people of Mwai have seen or heard of President San in Mwai, you know, shooting birds. Well, and from what I'm getting from them, they have never seen, heard anything of that sort. Okay. And we are even shocked and surprised that, you know, the rich and mighty do those kind of activities in our farms. Okay. And we have not been seeing them. But nevertheless, these guns which have been recovered, and that is the most important point, are guns that have been hired to the goons. And there is very, very clear evidence of linking those guns which are being recovered from elites in Kenya to the protests that are happening.
Honorable Kagushia, allow me now to follow up. Because
you have also seen there are some people who are in court as we are talking now on the allegation of holding illegal guns. Are you getting? So, my brother, when it is now clear that these protests have been done and organized by these guys, and they have also planted within themselves killer gangs inside their own riots. And that is why you have seen the top-notch ODM leaders have not been participating in these riots because they know what they have done.
The participation aside, let's come back to...
That's how they have cancelled this maandamano.
Okay, you have mentioned, you have alleged that the case of Mlolongo, for example, that there are some protesters who were armed. Well, it's not first 3 hours, it's 7-hour standoff between police and protesters. I was there that whole day, and I was present.
But let me just finish. 3 hours without police, 4 hours now with the police.
Okay. All throughout, there was police presence. I was there in person. And it was after that they got reinforcements from Machakos and some from the flying squad unit of the DCI, and even the anti-terror unit which was present, because I covered that 7-hour ordeal at the expressway. It's unfortunate, Honorable Kagushia, that... you made your point. Allow me to ask you the question. That the expressway was damaged, Quickmart supermarket was also damaged, but not looted. I was present and documented. However, I've also documented cases of police killings, even with my phone. I have it here, of 4 who were killed by police. I mean, when you say that they were armed, I never witnessed any as such. I was on the ground for 7 hours. And these are innocent Kenyans who were killed by police. Where do you draw the line? And when you make allegation of these who are armed through the guns that are owned and recovered from current homes of people who you never mentioned, number one, how do you substantiate that claim? Number two, what about the sanctity of the human lives of the 4 people who were killed in Mlolongo in the last time that the opposition had protested?
Yeah, one of the issues that I want to point out, you covered for us Mlolongo.
7 hours.
7 hours, and we could see it on TV. Yeah. Do you know we were wondering what is happening? Because violent protests, people are destroying property, and they took time to destroy property, and we could not see police engaging them. And it was clear on TV. We could see it on your TV as you are covering. And I'm sure you also saw it with your eyes. And we were wondering, is there some kind of, you know, protest also from some of those guys there? And in fact, I'm one of the people who called upon even the police force that is around that area also to be investigated. Are you getting? Why is it that you allow those kind of destruction, that kind of destruction to go on without much intervention?
Well, Honorable Kagusha, okay, allow me to tell you the reason, and I want a specific answer to my question. Yeah. Police at some point had run out of tear gas and even live ammunition. Why not for the reinforcement which came from Machakos and also from the flying squad unit? That aside, on the substantiation of the claim you made of the guns from which you said recovered from current homes and some used to plant amongst the protesters to be used by the protesters during the opposition-led protest. I mean, how do you substantiate that claim first? That is the question.
You know, without having to give a blanket condemnation of police, there are a few rogue policemen who are also used by the politicians. to advance their claim.
In what way?
Because in the whole of this, some people just want to create a narrative of police brutality. And
that's not the question, because of time, because we need to sample the feedback. You made an allegation of the guns that were recovered, you said, from current homes of some politicians that were used during the protests by the opposition protesters. How do you substantiate that claim? Because there's an authority that checks over the firearms because it licenses. So how do you substantiate the claim you made of guns that were planted by the opposition?
I think I have already substantiated that. I have already clearly indicated that there are people in court already on the allegation of having illegal firearms, and some of them legal, and some of them were actually used in this protest. And
how do you substantiate? That's the claim I'm making, because you're not a court of law.
Is it not
you're
enough?
Not the independent authority that ought to be speaking.
Is it not enough, Ayub?
Yep.
Is it not enough that the police have intelligence, police have raided, police have made arrests, police have charged? Is it not that enough for you?
Okay, who is in court? Tell me who is in court for having illegal or legal firearm? Who?
Didn't you see people being produced yesterday?
Who are they? Okay, there are many. Oluoch, Maina Njenga, Babo Wino, who are they?
What allegations were given on Maina Njenga? What charges were preferred against him?
But who is the authority that ought to be speaking about this?
Have you seen what Kindiki has said? Kindiki says, this is page 4 of Daily Nation. Okay. Have you seen? Kindiki says 23 firearms suspected to have been used in illegal activities were recovered in current homes.
Okay.
Is Kindiki an authority to you?
Well, you said that from current homes were used by opposition protesters, for example, in Mulolongo. I want the substantiation from Kindiki. Take it over from there. And tell me about the process from where that was taken, the guns were taken, but for the protesters to be used during the protest. That's
the kind of the kind of a question you're asking, you may never get an answer because I am not.
Why then do you allege?
I am not. No, I allege because there is intelligence at front.
And you're not an independent authority on intelligence.
And you see, I have said, I did not organize that myself.
Yeah.
But it is clear that there are goons that are planted by the ODM protesting organizers to kill, so that we have numbers of being people killed, and so that we can have correct noise from correct places. Are you getting? And that is why I'm saying, even the kind of vigil that is going to be done tomorrow, it is shame. It is shame that same people who organize for people to be killed now want to protest, to organize vigil against the same, and that's how you have also seen even some of those policemen have also lost their life.
All right.
And also, we also have some rogue policemen also, by the way, who are also used to propagate the same. Now, that is not to say,
because we want to put this into context and also involve Honorable Chair. Honorable Kagusha, I get your point at the best interest of time.
Yeah.
So you alleged, number one, you're not an independent authority that has access to intelligence because there's an agency for that. Number two, there are people who are briefed on the same for an action to be taken. Number three, you never pointed out factually how the guns were taken from the current homes of the people you have mentioned, because Kindiki stopped at that and the planting of the same amongst the protesters, among the protesters, which you failed to factualize here. I'll come to you, Honorable Chair. Let's take a look at this. Okay, hang on. I'll give you the time.
But
I have given you enough time. Honorable Kagusha, I've given you enough time. Okay.
Is it not enough for sure, that intelligence was provided to the, to the law enforcement institutions?
Thank you.
Guns were recovered, and they knew exactly where those guns were.
Okay.
And
the point is, you never proved how the guns were taken to.
But there's a court that will prove, not me.
Hang on.
People are in court.
But you're not the court, and that's what I told you. You're not the authority. Well, the courts of law admit cases based on the threshold, and they will administer a ruling.
Can we wait for the court rulings?
Okay, let's get this and then proceed with the discussion. And the lawyers' lobby is calling for commitment to the rule of law. And in reference to recently documented cases of police excesses by rights groups, prolonged detention of suspects before presentation in a court of law, alleged abduction by law enforcement agencies, and transferring suspects to places outside the jurisdiction of their arrest, the Law Society of Kenya is calling for adherence to the principles of good governance, calling out the government for what it calls subversion of the Constitution. In a statement, LSK says in part, in the past few days, we have witnessed increased cases of citizens being arrested in clandestine manner, similar to abduction by law enforcement agencies and transferred to police stations and other known places outside the jurisdiction of the arrest, while being denied communication with their families or advocates, contrary to the Constitution. LSK adding that recent events risk sliding the country back to the dark days, while calling for accountability from relevant institutions.
So these are questions that we have to ask ourselves and to be extremely worried that not even a year or so down the line of this administration.
In the run-up to the presidential election in 2022, President William Ruto, then a presidential candidate, accused the state of misusing the criminal justice system, pledging that his administration will respect the constitutional boundary between the institutions of government. And after forming government,
and I pray that Kenya never again goes to a place where the criminal justice system is used to manipulate politics.
And the head of state pledging to not interfere with the workings of the justice system, guaranteeing an operational space.
There was a huge push by the former administration, our friends, to use the criminal justice system to run their politics, and to fabricate, cases against people merely because they didn't agree with their political side. It is in the public domain.
However, nearly a year into office and in the midst of opposition-led anti-government protests, the government appears to be singing from the same script it accused the previous administration of. And despite reported police brutality during the protests.
Na mimi nataka niwaambie polisi wetu hongera kwa kusimama kidete na kuhakikisha kwamba kuna amani na kuhakikisha kwamba wahalifu wote wanachukuliwa hatua, ndio tuhakikisha kwamba kuna amani Kenya.
The Law Society of Kenya is raising a red flag, saying actions by the police are a reflection of Kenya's past.
We are witnessing scenes that are reminiscent of the days when we had one party rule.
Recent events of documented police brutality brings to the limelight a service that often comes under scrutiny for its actions, with the Independent Policing and Oversight Authority IPOA now actively investigating cases of police killings during the opposition anti-government protests. Ayub Abdikadir, Citizen TV. Honorable Chen, coming to you. You are both members of the Law Society of Kenya. First of all, do you agree with your president?
Totally. I associate myself totally with the assessment of my chairperson and the Council of LSK. I told you earlier, this country has seen very bad days before. We can't even imagine going back there. And so, looking at what we've seen there in Bondo, and in Kisumu, it's heart-rending. It is not what should be happening in 21st century. Police are supposed to subdue, not to clobber. If the issue was to arrest, then arrest him. So I associate myself totally with the sentiments by LSK. Number two, I also associate totally with the comments of the president that the criminal justice system should not be used to settle political scores. What has happened in the last 4 or 5 days makes one cringe. Because we can't have a country, Ayub, where we are not sure whether the police are the police. That's what Honorable Kagucha is saying. That there are areas where the police are not the police. That they are civilians who are masquerading as police. We even saw some of them arresting protesters in plain clothes. I believe that the demos, and I'm really happy that they're not going to be demos tomorrow, the demos had been hijacked by criminal elements. The demos had been hijacked by people whose end is not to fight to reduce the cost of living.
Thank you.
But let me finish my point.
We are out of time, briefly, as you do so.
Yeah, and I want to request the police IG and my teacher and friend, the Minister, Commissioner for Interior, that however badly the situation is, we should never, ever get to what we've seen last week, where people are clobbered, someone is killed because their child was... I saw a protester in Kibra saying that this child has been tear-gassed, and he's protesting that, why did you have to tear-gas my kid? And then instead of being taken care of, he's being clobbered. I mean, we must... You know, there's a member of parliament who has brought a bill in parliament to try to create a situation where the police can access mental health care and all this.
Yeah.
I hope that in future we can take care of both our police in the right manner. But as I end, Ayub, I want to request all our leaders, wherever they be. There's only one Kenya. There's no other Kenya. Everyone is hurting globally. This is the time not to fight. This is not the time to fund chaos. This is not the time to grandstand. This is not the time to know who is right and who is wrong. This is not the time for ego trips. This is the time for us to come together and speak together. And also speak to the church directly too. This is not the time for also them to take sides. This is a time for them to bring us together. Because I believe that, like Honorable Kajuja has said, we are seeing the church almost taking sides. And this we should be avoided. We can always agree on one thing, Ayub. That the lives of Kenyans, on which sides is sacrosanct. We cannot be killing each other because of power or because we want to seem to be right in one point in time. We can actually surely talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's now, I'll come to you. Well, let's sample the feedback and then I'll give you the final word.
Okay.
Here's what you're saying on Twitter. The hashtag is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. The first one coming from Okelo Mwalimu. Major problem Kenya faces in her quest for political stability is death of morality among political animals. That's why it's possible for leaders like Ochieng to be elected on Azimio ticket, only to jump ship over to KK and vehemently support policies he never subscribed to. Engineer Lazaro says Honorable Kagusha's statement is very categorically clear that President Ruto is under siege of new powerful Mount Kenya cliques. With a lot of bitterness, we must sober up or we risk pushing other areas to seek secession, governance and bitterness. Kipto Ruto _ says many Kenyans share concerns about the current direction, but the government's tough decision aims to secure a long-term solution. Raising taxes to fund essential services instead of relying on borrowing is a bold step to ease the burden on taxpayers.
That's right.
Kiswe Philip says attempting to silence opposition by buying opposition MPs and then passing draconian finance bill to emasculate the people, then you start to hide in handshake and dynasties to prevent meaningful dialogue that is meant to solve the issues affecting Kenyans. Isn't right. Brian Chemwa says let Azimio and Kenya Kwanza promote dialogue and negotiation and emphasize reconciliation and inclusivity as strategies for ending political instability. Embrace initiatives, i.e. establishing independent commissions, promoting diversity in appointments. Babu Michel K says the president says he has the responsibility to protect the lives of other Kenyans, but what we have seen in the streets are bullet deaths, and is it not contradicting? I'm really disturbed by deaths and don't think any unarmed Kenyan should be shot. Remy Butia says Kenyans must resist the temptation to be compartmentalized into tribal cocoons for political gain and stand for justice and fairness. When Kenya burns, it's me and you who will be destitute and homeless. Ernest _ HSC says it's crucial to avoid making sweeping generalizations about any group, as it can lead to division and hinder progress. Honorable Kagusha should encourage an impartiality to solve issues at hand. Kenya Kwanza should stop being hypocritical. Godi Barasa says it's quite confusing and heartbreaking to be a Kenyan citizen right now. The current administration holds an opinion that it's doing things right, but the opposition says there are massive contraventions of the constitution by the Kenya Kwanza regime. And Honorable Kagusha, we are out of time. Yes, the final comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to say we do not support killings by anyone, neither the police nor the goons, whether hired by any person. We do not support. And so we want to urge every other person who is involved with keeping the law must ensure that no killings are done. The issue of talks and dialogue, the government has engaged in this. We have a bipartisan team that is led by the co-chairs. And I want to believe that that is one of the avenues that the president has given and really the leadership has given for people to engage. And so those people who are calling for dialogue actually just need to ask the Azimio side or the ODM side to go back to the bipartisan talks table, because the table is laid and they have refused to talk. And the last thing is we appreciate and agree that Kenyans are going through hard times. because the cost of living is high, not only in Kenya, but globally. But the way we are going to solve this is not by having economic sabotage. That will only make our problem bigger. The only way we are going to do this is by producing more. Okay. So I want to ask those people who are calling for dialogue, when we already have bipartisan team, to call for more fertilizer, to call the government to ensure that there are issues that are going to help lower the cost of living, but not to really direct their energies on a dialogue which is going to lead more to a political settlement on that side. And so production is important. Fertilizer and farming and people going back to their farms and people engaging in productive activities in this republic is going to help us a lot.
Thank you.
Well, let us enjoy the peace and hope that the protagonists can ensure that we are all focused on one thing. And when all is said and done, I want to request the opposition to join hands with the parliament to ensure that government spends the money it collects properly, prudently, efficiently, accountably, in a way that is going to help Kenyans. Because that is where our focus is going.
Thank you. And that is the responsibility needed from the country's leadership. Honorable John Kagusha, MP Mukurweini constituency, thank you for your time and company, all appreciated. Honorable David Ochieng, the MP representing Ugenya constituency, your time is also all appreciated. We ought to have heard the Senator, Kisii County Richard Onyonka, and who never showed up. Thank you so much, nonetheless, for your time, and it's all appreciated. And thank you to you too for watching the broadcast and waking up with us, and thanks for the feedback. Up next is Safin Achieng Ouma, and with her team and the gang members CJ Atemo and QT with the next segment here on the broadcast. We'll see you tomorrow morning here on Daybreak. See you then. Good morning.